Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Small Business Solver presentation on business succession planning. Just pop over to the next slide and we've got an outline of what I'll be talking about today. As far as what I'll be talking about today, just give a general lay of the land for business succession planning. Talk about the differences between what succession planning is and what continuation planning is. Talk about the planning process generally, and then some of the key points that you need to consider when making your business continuation plan and your business succession plan. No matter what type of continuation or succession plan it is that you're making. Okay, so a little bit about myself. I'm a small business lawyer and an entrepreneur, and recently retired after 17 years in the Canadian Army. So as far as the planning process goes, my Army experience really informs my my approach to planning, and I found it particularly useful in business. I'm building my law practice around socially, environmentally, and ethically responsible small businesses. And my current focus for business development is succession planning for small businesses. So going to the next slide, succession planning for small businesses, why is it such a big deal? Over the next decade, half of Canada's small and mid-sized business owners are going to retire. And in the next 5 years, you're looking at about 310,000 baby boomer-owned small businesses that will be transferring ownership and control. Baby boomers being Canada's wealthiest generation ever, they certainly have the most to pass on, which CIBC estimates somewhere in the ballpark of $1.9 trillion in asset transfers over 5 years, $3.7 trillion over the next decade. So it's a huge amount of money, property, and business changing hands. But with all of this changing hands, 60% of baby boomers still haven't considered business succession planning, which is a shockingly high number considering my parents are baby boomers. They're 70 years old and they retired 7 or 8 years ago. It's certainly a pressing issue because these things do take time. So going to the next slide. Business succession and business continuation are two different but related things. Continuation planning is focused on what happens if the owner dies or is incapacitated suddenly. So how will the business continue in your absence? Focusing primarily on who controls the shares that business owner owns and what the operations of the business will be. Succession planning focuses more on retirement for that business owner. So again, those two key questions of who will control the company, so both the ownership of shares and the operations, and then who gets the profits of the company. So you as the small business owner, how do you get that value out that you built up in the business? So both continuation planning and succession planning involve having some fairly painful discussions with stakeholders, particularly your family and your employees, because it's talking about illness and death and what happens and what your wishes are, which are not exactly fun dinner table conversations. And both involve identifying and training at least one, hopefully more, successors. So if we can pop to the next slide, I'll touch on the planning process generally, and this is where my Army stuff comes in. 4 parts of the planning process: aim, factors, courses, and plan. The aim is your overall goal. What is it you're trying to do? And in almost all cases, the goal is to see the business in good hands going forward. What does that mean? That means you want to make sure that the operation of the business continues uninterrupted, or at least as smoothly as possible. That the business owner has financial security while they're incapacitated or when they're retired, and that the business itself is financially secure, that the owner isn't pulling more out of the business than the balance sheet can stand, and to prevent or limit disputes, whether it's claims on the estate, whether it's disputes between the family and the employees after the fact. If you have a well-developed, well-thought-out, well-communicated plan, everybody understands that in advance, and it keeps the fighting to a minimum. Factors involved, some of the key ones, there's many factors involved, and each business will be different, but some of the key core ones are time. continuation and succession planning takes months to put together and is usually implemented over the span of years. And you've got to balance that off against the age of the owner and the age and experience of the successors, and figure out how much time do you actually have to put this to make this plan and put it into effect. People are another key factor. How important is the owner to the business? Is it a services business like a law firm, accounting business, where the owner is the business, or is it something like manufacturing where things can continue a little bit more smoothly with different people at the helm? The availability of able and willing successors, and the consultation with stakeholders, investors, customers, clients, suppliers, things like that. And of course, the almighty dollar is another factor, whether it's the value of the business, how available financing is, making sure that the business remains financially viable while the plan is being put into place. The tax consequences are a big one, legal and accounting costs, and the income needs of the owner. So those are some of the key factors. Like I said, there's likely plenty more that depend on the type of the business. So once you've looked at where you're going and the things that will impact your ability to get there, you start to develop courses of action. So consulting with your advisors, lawyer, accountant, and insurance agents especially, because those are the ones who'll deal with a lot of the plumbing of how to put this together. You want to develop multiple plans, multiple courses of action, because necessarily your first plan might fall through. You might need a backup plan. And you want to discuss the benefits and drawbacks with your key advisors and with the key stakeholders. You want to do that on an ongoing basis, so that not only are you pushing information out about what it is that you want, what you're thinking about doing, but you can also pull back information on how you can actually put this into effect and what impact this might have on your employees, on your managers, or on different sections of your business. Once you've done all that, you can make your plan. So the key information that goes into the plan, if we pop to the next slide, so we're talking about two types of plans here. The first one is the business continuation plan, and this is if the business owner is incapacitated or dies unexpectedly, what happens to the business? So the key elements of this are to figure out who's going to look after the owner's interests. So if you are the business owner, who do you want to vote your shares or your stake in the partnership or whatever the business structure is? And what limits are you putting on their authority to make decisions? Are they allowed to sell shares? Are they allowed to vote to sell the company? That sort of stuff. The short and long-term care needs of the if you're incapacitated and you're out for a month with a broken leg, that's a lot different than if you suffer a stroke and you're going to need ongoing medical support for the rest of your life. And at what point is the line drawn between the differences? What's the difference between short-term and long-term care? Who makes that call? At what point does somebody need to say, okay, this is not something that the person is going to come back from? What do we do about it? And you need to balance the needs of the owner with the needs of the other stakeholders. And one of the most important ones is the business itself. So the employees, the family, whoever it is that depends on that business for their livelihood. Another key factor, who's going to run the company? So selecting and training a successor, they both have to be willing and able to do the job. And then it's going to probably take some training to bring them up to speed. Once you've identified that this is a person who could take over the business, how do you build up the skill set so that if something does happen, that they can step in and be as effective as possible? And again, dealing with major decisions, what sort of limits on authority do you want to give? Like what decisions are they able to make? What are they not able to make in your absence? There's a bunch of legal documents involved in that. Typically, you put together a written continuation plan, and then directors or the shareholders get together and discuss and accept that plan. You'll need to make sure that the powers of attorney are appropriate, that mesh with, especially with the limits that you're putting on the attorney. the person who'll be managing your affairs for you. And setting out employment agreements is the key thing. A lot of business owners don't have employment agreements with themselves, describing what the job is that they do, what the expectations are, and what the conditions are surrounding that, which can make it very useful for somebody who needs to step into your shoes. They can look at that contract and understand what it is that you do. And insurance forms a key part of this. Usually it's taken out, a policy is taken out by the company on the owner, whether it's a disability policy, which can look after the owner's care, or if it's key person insurance, which is paid to the business to help cover the losses that the business suffers while you're out of commission, or to hire, train, and pay a replacement. So that's the business continuation plan and the key factors in that. Business succession plan, there are 4 main ways in which you pass on a business. So business succession plan is your retirement. You're phasing yourself out for a beautiful walk into the sunset. So 4 main ways: transferring within the family, selling the business to management or to employees, selling the business to a complete outsider, and transferring in a will. And of course, you can do any sort of hybrid Frankenstein's monster of these methods, and these are by no means the only way to do it. They're just the most common and quite often the most practical. The common issues with all of them that'll be most difficult for small business owners are the valuation of the business. There's many different ways to do it. You can agree on the value of the business. You can deal with, you can have an accountant value it. You can have a certified business valuator value it. But a lot of businesses these days are very difficult to value because they're service-based. And much of the value of the business is the service that they're able to provide. Some of that is tied to the owner. Some of that's tied to the employees. And how do you put a price tag on that? And tax planning is another key one. Your tax, typically succession plans are tax driven. If there's anywhere over about $200,000 of worth in the business, it is certainly worth getting tax advice. And typically it'll be the tax accountant who will come up with the plan on how to do it. Once you've figured out who you want the business to go to, tax accountant will make the plan and the lawyer will put it into effect. So I'll break each one of these down. Moving on to the next slide, we'll start with transferring the business within the family. So family transfer usually needs about a 5 to 10 year lead time in order to put the plan into effect. Again, transferring operations of the business, so training that successor, bringing them up to speed, bringing the next generation into the management, into the board oversight, and really understanding how the back end of the business works. And the other key factor is financing, especially if you're a baby boomer handing the business over to somebody in their 20s or 30s. You're going to have to, somebody in their 20s and 30s that doesn't necessarily have the money to buy out a $500,000 business. So figuring out between yourselves how is it that you'll be bought out of that business. And the key here is how do you generate income, or a steady income for the retiring owner, and give the business enough financial flexibility still to stay in the black. So some key legal work involved in that. These are usually done by way of a unanimous shareholders agreement, where the shares will gradually be transferred over time. Can be done by an estate freeze, where basically the value of the company is frozen at a moment in time. And any further growth in the business goes to the next generation, and that original built-up value is extracted slowly over time by the business owner, and can also be done through family trusts and all that sort of stuff. The next one is a sale to management and employees. Usually a little bit shorter lead time because the management and employees are already deeply involved in the operations of the business. But again, bringing them up into the role that you're doing, giving them face time with clients and with suppliers, giving them experience in dealing with the key business advisors, taking the time to make sure that they understand how the company is put together and why it's put together that way. And again, financing, especially if your employees are not anticipating buying you out of the business. then you need some time to put money together, or you might need to sort of gradually phase the buyout. The difference between this and the family transfer is that it tends to be a more legalistic process. It's closer to a sale of a business, so that the person who's taking over the business may want to conduct due diligence. If they're properly advised, they probably will, really to understand the books of the company. And both sides will probably want independent legal advice to make sure that what's being sold is indeed what's being bought. So key legal work involved in this can be employee stock option plans, where they either buy in or part of their salary is transferred into shares of the company. Can be done by a straight up agreement of purchase and sale if they have the money or the financing to do it. Services agreements, so setting out what the business owner, the outgoing business owner's role in the business will be on an ongoing basis. That they may want you to sit on the board, or sort of phase yourself out gradually down to 3 days a week and then 1 day a week, just to retain your knowledge. And the outgoing business owner is going to want to be indemnified by the company, meaning that the things that they did well as part of their job within the company, that they're still protected legally from, even though they're no longer the owner or director or officer of the company, and releases from liability. The next one is a third-party sale. Much less lead time, more in the span of months here, 3 to 6 months typically, to go out and to find a buyer and to put together the deal. Dealing with two basic ways to sell a business. One is an asset purchase, where they're buying the actual assets of the business, each individual asset. The other one is a share purchase for a corporation, where they come in and they buy the shares off of you. And there's different tax consequences to both of those. Some things need to be structured as a share purchase, like anything with a liquor license. Liquor licenses belong to the corporation and they're not transferable. So, if you buy them by way of asset purchase, the new buyer would have to go out and get a different liquor license. The key here in a third-party sale is to maximize the value for the vendor. Really, because you only have this one shot to get all the value out of your business that you built up, and you want to get the most out of it that you possibly can. Fair bit of work involved in preparing for due diligence. A lot of small business owners don't necessarily keep their, especially their legal books up to date, or a little fast and loose with the accounting, or at least with the record keeping. So putting together all those books and records so that the buyer can come in and make sure that they're buying what you're telling them that they're buying. So the key legal work involved in that, a lot of work with the corporate records, making sure the employee agreements are in place and are valid and say what they need to say. The agreement of purchase and sale is the big one. That's the contract of here's all the things that are being sold and here are the conditions of it. And then the compliance with Bulk Sales Act. If you're selling all the assets of it, there's the government's word that there's potential for fraud in there. So moving to the next one, the sort of fourth main, most commonly used option is wills, passing business in the will. Most lawyers will tell you that this is not a viable option. I think it can be, but only in certain circumstances, and usually when it's an only child, and that only child has been working in the business for a while, and everybody knows that the intention is for that child to take over the business. But what you're doing when you pass a business in a will, you're pushing all of the risks, all of the things that you would plan for in your succession plan. You're pushing all those risks to the estate and possibly to the beneficiary. So the estate taxes, the final tax return, because all of your assets in the company are liquidated and then they're passed on. So the tax bill from that might put the company into the red right away. There's a risk of infighting among the family, people who thought that they would be entitled to the business, or at least a part of the business. And then you may well have shareholders that don't want a business. If you say I divide it equally among my children, and you have 3 children, and only one of them wants to be involved in the business, but they don't necessarily have the control that they need to run the business. So can be useful, typically not recommended, but certainly is an option. And there was Carl actually sent me a great article in the Globe business section the other day on the 7 deadly sins of succession planning, and I've sort of molded that in with the things that I've dealt with into these key common failures in succession planning. First and foremost is that people put together a plan that looks great on paper, but the training and experience aren't there, the financing isn't there, or just the will of the successor to take over the business isn't there to put the plan in action. So one of the key things to keep in mind when you're making your succession plan and when you're talking with the people involved in it or will be involved in it is that you, as the outgoing owner, will probably not be acting on that plan. You'll be sort of carried along by it, but if you suffer a heart attack or you're hospitalized for some reason, other people have to act on the plan that you made. So keep it practical and ideally simple and flexible. Next one is if you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. A lot of people think it's too early to start planning. I guess 60% of baby boomers haven't even considered succession planning, like I said. So, now is the time to start having these conversations, because some of those lead times, particularly in order to make the buyouts effective, just need that much time to be put into place. And for younger business owners, the business continuation plan is really the key. If you're not looking at retiring anytime soon, putting that business continuation plan into effect. I have a friend of mine is 38 years old, a business owner, and he's recently suffered a series of heart attacks leading to a triple bypass, and he's been out of commission for a month and probably out of commission for another 2 months as he recuperates, and didn't have a plan in place. And family has jumped into place, but now he's missing business opportunities, and because he's just not in a condition to be able to deal with the stresses of it. So never too early to start planning. Failing to train your successors properly is another key one. It takes time. There's different types of learning involved, book learning and on-the-job experience and shadowing. To be guided learning and independent learning, and you want to work in a good mix of those. And quite frankly, putting them right front and center, throwing them into the breach, and giving them face time with key people and in key situations, and seeing how they handle decision-making power is very important. If you give people a gradual increase of responsibility, that enables them to learn more effectively. And the bonus that comes out of it, that even if you've trained up a successor and you're not ready to retire yet, you can start taking some vacations and get a little bit of time away from the business and feel a little more comfortable with how it's being run. The focusing on external candidates while failing to train sort of quote unquote less qualified internal talent. Just because somebody isn't ready now doesn't mean that they won't be ready. So take a look at their track record, take a look at their personal characteristics and how it is that they learn, and give them a chance to show their stuff. External candidates can be enticing and they can be great, but do they mesh with the business culture that you've built? Are your key employees going to get along with them? Are they going to come in and tick off all of your customers by changing the way that they do business? It's they say hire slow, fire quick, and if you've hired a successor, it becomes very difficult to fire. And also be wary of promoting somebody to or past their level of incompetence. Everybody has a level that they can reach where they hit capacity and they're not able to do any more. And be careful that you're not putting somebody in that situation. And lastly, the fear that there'll be some sour grapes on the part of those who were not the chosen ones. That they might leave the company out of bitterness, or they, the existing employees may not like the successor, might not like working for the successor. They might have got along perfectly well socially, but then they don't take well to them being the boss. And you can mitigate that to some extent with discussions, sitting down and having those open and honest conversations. But really, at the end of the day, it's a decision that only you as the business owner can make, and that's the beauty of leadership. So I believe that's my last slide. Yeah. So at this point, I'd open it up to any questions, whether it's in the chat or